For 40 years, this house greeted you with the smell of vanilla and slow-cooked pot roast on Sundays. It was a warm, heavy scent, the kind that hugs you the moment you walk through the door, telling you that you are safe, you are loved, and you are home. My late husband, Arthur, used to say that he could navigate this house blindfolded just by following his nose to the kitchen. But today, sitting in the armchair that my daughter-in-law Karen hasn't thrown out yet, the only thing I can smell is aggressive lemon antiseptic and bleach. Ever since my son David married Karen and they moved in to help me out, the atmosphere has shifted. It's no longer a home, it's a showroom. Karen calls it minimalist chic. She painted over my floral wallpaper with a stark hospital white. She replaced the soft, worn rugs with cold hardwood that echoes when you walk. She says it's cleaner. To me, it just feels cold. This morning, the silence was broken by the sound of packing tape ripping. Rip, rip. I walked into the living room, my cane tapping softly on the new floor. Karen was there, humming a tune, placing objects into a large cardboard box marked donations. My breath caught in my throat. In her hand, she held the delicate porcelain shepherdess figurine my mother had brought over from the old country in 1950. It survived 3 moves, 2 earthquakes, and raising a child. "Karen?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What are you doing with that?" She didn't even look up. She just wrapped the shepherdess in newspaper, smothering its history in cheap print. "Oh, hi, Rose," she said, flashing that tight, bright smile that never reached her eyes. "We're just doing a little autumn decluttering. I read in a design blog that visual clutter creates mental stress. We don't need all this dust-collecting junk, do we?" Junk. She tossed the wrapped bundle into the box. A dull thud followed. "That junk belonged to my mother," I whispered. Karen sighed, the way one sighs at a slow child. "I know, sweetie, but we have to look forward, not backward. Plus, David agrees. We need space for the new modern art pieces I ordered." I looked at David. He was standing in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee, looking at his phone. He heard everything. He saw his wife throwing away his grandmother's legacy. He didn't say a word. He just took a sip of coffee and scrolled past me. I sat back down in my chair, gripping the handle of my cane until my knuckles turned white. The smell of bleach was overwhelming now. It stung my eyes. Or maybe that wasn't the bleach. I realized then that Karen wasn't just redecorating. She wasn't just cleaning. She was erasing. She was scrubbing away 40 years of my life, layer by layer, hoping that eventually I would just fade away into the white walls, leaving the house to her. But as I watched her tape up the box, a spark lit up in my chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was the quiet, stubborn heat of a dying fire that refuses to go out. She thought I was just a fragile old woman. She forgot that before I was a grandmother, I was a mother, and mothers know how to protect their nest. My grandson, Leo, is only 7 years old. He has his father's eyes and my late husband's sweet tooth. For years, our little tradition was baking chocolate chip cookies on Tuesday afternoons. He would sit on the counter, swinging his legs, waiting to lick the spoon. It was the only time I saw him truly smile lately. Yesterday, Leo came up to me, tugging on my sleeve. "Grandma," he whispered, looking around to make sure his mother wasn't watching. "Can we make cookies? I'm hungry." I smiled and took his small hand. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's get the flour." We walked into the kitchen. I reached for the handle of the pantry door, the walk-in pantry Arthur built for me with his own hands. It didn't open. I pulled again, locked. I looked down. There, drilled crudely into the beautiful oak wood, was a shiny new brass hasp and a heavy padlock. A padlock on a kitchen pantry. "Problem, Rose?" I turned around. Karen was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady in front of the boy, "why is there a lock on the food?" She finally looked up, raising an eyebrow as if I were the crazy one. "It's not food, Rose. It's ingredients for chaos. Leo has been hyperactive lately. I've decided we're going sugar-free, gluten-free, and joy-free effective immediately. She didn't say joy-free, but she might as well have. Plus, I can't have you baking all day. It steams up the windows and ruins the aesthetic. He's a child, I said, stepping between her and Leo. He's hungry. He needs a snack. He can have a kale chip, she said, pointing to a bowl of dry green leaves on the counter that looked like yard trimmings. If he's really hungry, he'll eat that. Otherwise, he's just bored. It's called discipline, Rose. You should have tried it with David. Maybe he wouldn't be so soft. Leo looked at the kale, then at the locked door, and his shoulders slumped. He didn't argue. He just walked away, defeated. A 7-year-old shouldn't know what defeat feels like. That night was worse. Around 9 p.m., I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. It was Leo. He was crying quietly outside his parents' bedroom door. "Mom? Dad? My tummy hurts." I waited. I waited for David to open the door. I waited for him to sneak his son a sandwich. I waited for him to be a father. But the door stayed shut. I heard Karen's muffled voice from inside. "Go to sleep, Leo. Kitchen is closed." I sat in my dark room, listening to my grandson cry himself to sleep in the hallway of the house I owned. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about decoration anymore. This wasn't about disrespect. This was cruelty. I looked at the locked pantry door in my mind. Karen thought she held the keys to this kingdom. She didn't realize that when you back a mother bear into a corner, she doesn't get scared. She gets ready to tear the door down. The next evening, Karen called a family meeting. I walked into the dining room to find blueprints spread out across the table I had bought for Thanksgiving dinners 20 years ago. Karen didn't pull out a chair for me. She just tapped a manicured fingernail on the paper. "Great news, Rose," she announced, her voice high and pitchy, like she was talking to a toddler. "We've been thinking about your independence. You need your own space, a place where you can reflect." She pointed to a square on the blueprint labeled ADU, Accessory Dwelling Unit. "We're going to renovate the detached garage," she said, beaming. "Turn it into a cute little studio just for you. Think about it. No noisy kids, total privacy. And David and I can finally have the master suite we need." I looked out the window at the garage. It was a cinder block shell built in the 70s. It had a concrete floor that cracked in the frost. It had no insulation. In the winter, you could see your breath in there. In the summer, it was an oven. "Karen," I said slowly, "that garage has no heating. It has no plumbing. The roof leaks." "That's why we're renovating," she said quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "We'll put in a space heater, a composting toilet. It'll be rustic chic, very trendy right now. Tiny living is huge, Rose. A composting toilet. She wanted me to use a bucket in a shed so she could have my bedroom." I looked at David. He was sitting there, twisting his wedding ring, staring intently at the floorboards. "David," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "you want your mother to live in the garage, where your father used to change the oil in the Buick?" He finally looked up, but his eyes were glassy. He was reciting a script she had fed him. "It makes financial sense, Mom," he mumbled. "It adds value to the property. Square footage, equity, plus, you're getting older. Stairs are hard." "I climb the stairs just fine," I said. "It's decided," Karen interrupted, rolling up the blueprints with a final snap. "Contractors are coming for quotes on Monday. You should start boxing up your things. Only the essentials, though. It's a compact space." She walked out of the room, energized by her own brilliance. David lingered for a second, looking like he wanted to say something, wanted to apologize. But the fear of his wife was stronger than the love for his mother. He stood up and followed her, leaving me alone in the dining room. I looked out at the dark, cold garage standing in the shadows of the yard. It wasn't a granny flat. It was a storage unit for a person they no longer had a use for. They were trying to put me in a box and seal the lid. But as I stared at that cold, concrete structure, I remembered something. That garage was where Arthur kept his tools. And inside his old workbench, hidden under layers of dust and grease, was the blue velvet box. They were trying to push me out, but they were pushing me straight toward the only weapon that could destroy them. 2 days later, the contractors came and went. I heard them laughing in the driveway with Karen. "Lady, to bring that garage up to code, you're looking at 50 grand minimum. It's a tear down." I allowed myself a small smile as I pruned my rose bushes in the front yard. Arthur's garage is stubborn, I thought. Just like him. But my victory was short-lived. The next morning, I was on my knees in the garden, deadheading the hydrangeas, when I saw a pair of shiny Italian loafers step onto the grass right next to me. I looked up. A man in a sharp blue suit was standing there, holding a laser measuring device. He looked at me, then checked his clipboard. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, not unkindly. "Could you step aside? I need to get the dimensions of the curb appeal." "I beg your pardon?" I stood up, brushing the dirt from my knees. "Who are you?" Before he could answer, the front door swung open. Karen marched out, waving a folder in the air. "Rose, there you are. Meet Mr. Sterling. He's the top realtor in the county." My stomach dropped. "Realtor?" "Yes." Karen clapped her hands together. "We crunched the numbers, Rose. The garage renovation is just a money pit. It doesn't make sense. So David and I made an executive decision." She put her hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy and cold. "We're selling the house." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Selling?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "But this is Arthur's house. We built this. I planted these trees." "And it's huge," Karen interrupted, talking over me. "It's way too much work for you. Think about the cleaning, the stairs. We found a lovely condo for you downtown. It's on the 4th floor, has an elevator, and it's right next to the hospital. Very convenient. Next to the hospital, like I was just waiting to die." "And us?" I asked, looking at the house. "Where will you and the kids go?" "Oh, we're looking at a villa in the new development. Gated community. Better for our status," she whispered, the last part like it was a secret. "Mr. Sterling thinks we can list this place for a fortune. The market is hot." She turned back to the agent. "Make sure you highlight the garden in the listing photos. It's the best feature." She was selling my sweat, my memories, and my sanctuary to buy herself a gated villa. She looked at me not as a mother-in-law, but as an asset to be liquidated. A line item on a spreadsheet. I watched Mr. Sterling point his laser at my bedroom window. Beep. Just like that, my sanctuary was measured, quantified, and put up for sale. "I haven't agreed to this," I said, my voice shaking. Karen stopped smiling. Her eyes went hard. "Rose, don't make this difficult. The house is in David's name. Technically, you're just a guest. We're doing this for the family. Start packing." She turned on her heel and walked back inside, leaving me standing in the dirt with a stranger. But she made a mistake. She said the house was in David's name. She was so sure. She didn't know about the blue velvet box in the attic. I waited until the digital clock on my bedside table read 2 a.m. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of David snoring in the master bedroom. I slipped out of bed, ignoring the ache in my knees. I didn't turn on the lights. I knew this house better in the dark than Karen did with all the lights on. I moved like a ghost through the hallway, past the locked pantry, past the empty walls where my photos used to hang. I made my way to the ceiling hatch in the hallway, the entrance to the attic. Karen hated the attic. She called it a dust trap and refused to go up there. It was the only place in the house she hadn't sanitized yet. It was the last refuge of the Hendersons. I reached up with the hook pole and pulled down the folding stairs. They creaked, a loud wooden groan that sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. I froze, holding my breath, looking at David's door. Silence. I climbed up, one step at a time. The air up there was thick and smelled like cedar and old paper. It smelled like Arthur. I clicked on my small flashlight. The beam cut through the dancing dust motes, illuminating piles of boxes that Karen deemed unworthy. Old winter coats, broken lamps, stacks of National Geographic magazines. I pushed aside a box of Christmas decorations and found what I was looking for. Arthur's old navy peacoat, hanging on a nail in the far corner. It looked heavy, draped in shadows like a sentry standing guard. My hands trembled as I patted the pockets. Left pocket? Empty. Right pocket. My fingers brushed against something hard and fuzzy. I pulled it out. A small rectangular box covered in worn blue velvet. I sat down on a trunk, blowing the dust off the lid. Arthur was a simple man, but he was suspicious of the world. 2 years before he died, he told me, "Rose, I love our son, but he's weak. And weak men make bad decisions when money is involved." I opened the box. Inside, resting on the silk lining, were papers stamped with an official seal. The Henderson Family Irrevocable Trust. I adjusted my glasses and scanned the legal jargon, holding the flashlight steady with both hands. I read the date, 2012. I read the assets, the property located at 42 Oak Street. And then I read the most beautiful sentence I have ever seen in my life. Title to the property is held by the trust. No individual beneficiary, including David Henderson, holds the power to sell, mortgage, or transfer the asset without the unanimous consent of the Board of Trustees. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A tear rolled down my cheek and landed on the paper. Karen was right about one thing. The house was in David's name, originally, but she didn't know that David had signed it over to the trust a decade ago to avoid estate taxes. He had probably forgotten. He never paid attention to paperwork, he just signed where Arthur told him to. And Karen? She was trying to sell a house she didn't own. She was trying to sell a house David didn't own. I closed the box and clutched it to my chest. Up here in the dusty dark, I wasn't just a grandmother being pushed out. I was the widow of Arthur Henderson, and I had just found the ammunition to win the war. I climbed back down, pushed the stairs up, and went back to bed. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. Let the realtor come back tomorrow. I was ready. The next morning, Karen was busy shouting at the cleaning crew she had hired to stage the house. She barely noticed me slipping out the back door with my large knitting bag. I walked 4 blocks to a small, ivy-covered brick house. The brass plaque on the door read, "Martha Higgins, Attorney at Law, Estate Planning." Martha has been my friend for 40 years. She is 75, wears pearls every day, and has a mind like a steel trap. She opened the door before I even knocked. "Rose," she said, eyeing my bag, "you look like a woman on a mission. Earl Grey or English breakfast?" "English breakfast," I said. "I need something strong." We sat in her study, surrounded by wall-to-wall law books. I didn't waste time. I pulled the blue velvet box from my bag and placed it on her mahogany desk. Martha opened it. She put on her reading glasses, the ones on the gold chain. She scanned the documents in silence. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock. After a long minute, a slow, mischievous smile spread across her face. "Oh, Arthur," she chuckled softly. "You paranoid, brilliant old fox." She looked up at me. "You know what this is, Rose. This is an ironclad, irrevocable trust. It's tighter than a drum. David signed the deed over to this trust in 2012. He is not the owner. He is merely the current beneficiary with limited residency rights." "So?" I asked, leaning forward. "Karen can't sell the house?" "Sell it?" Martha laughed, a dry, sharp sound. "Rose, she can't even rent out a room without the trustees' approval. And guess who the trustees are?" She pointed to herself. "Me." Then she pointed to the document. "And a third-party corporate fiduciary." "So we stop her now?" I asked. "I can go back and wave this in her face?" Martha took a sip of her tea, her eyes narrowing over the rim of the cup. "We could," she said thoughtfully. "We could stop the listing today, but where's the fun in that?" I blinked. "Fun?" "If we tell her now, she'll just try another angle. She'll try to manipulate David into suing the trust. She'll make your life miserable in other ways." Martha leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But the trust has a very specific clause regarding malfeasance. If the resident attempts to sell trust property fraudulently, they forfeit their right to live there." My eyes widened. I mean, Martha smiled. "If we let her list the house, If we let her accept an offer, she is committing fraud. She is proving that she is a danger to the asset. And then, we can evict her, legally, permanently. She poured more tea into my cup. Let her play house, Rose. Let her clean. Let her stage. Let her host the open house. Let her dig her hole so deep she can never climb out of it. I took a sip of tea. It tasted delicious. The open house is on Sunday, I said. Perfect, Martha replied. I love a Sunday show. I'll bring the paperwork. You bring the cookies. Sunday arrived, the day of the execution, though Karen thought it was her coronation. She had been up since 5 a.m., screaming at David to rake leaves that had barely touched the ground. She placed vases of fresh lilies in every room, flowers I am allergic to, by the way. She baked a batch of frozen cookies just to make the house smell like a home she didn't know how to build. By 1 p.m., the driveway was full of luxury cars. The open house sign was planted firmly in my rose garden, stabbing into the soil like a conqueror's flag. Karen was in her element. She wore a white power suit and held a glass of sparkling water with a lime twist. She floated from room to room, charming potential buyers with lies. "Oh, the neighborhood is so quiet," I heard her tell a young couple. "The train tracks are 2 blocks away." "The plumbing was updated last year," she told a man in a suit. "It hasn't been touched since 1998. I sat on the porch swing, the one Arthur hung for me on our 25th anniversary. I had my knitting needles and a ball of red yarn. Karen came out for a smoke break, vaping actually, so she wouldn't smell. She leaned over me, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Rose, try to look a little more alive. Smile. And for God's sake, if anyone asks about the basement, just nod. Don't mention the damp." I looked up at her over my spectacles. "I'm just knitting, Karen. Knitting is very calming." "Just don't scare the buyers," she snapped, blowing a cloud of strawberry-scented vapor into the air. "We need a cash offer today if we want to secure that villa." I went back to my knitting. Click, click, click. Knit 1, purl 2. Let her lie, let her dig. A tall man with gray hair walked out onto the porch. He looked wealthy. "Beautiful structure," he said to me. "Solid bones. They don't make them like this anymore." "No," I said softly, looking at the wood Arthur had sanded with his own hands. "They certainly don't." Karen swooped in like a hawk. "Mr. Vance, I see you met our resident. Don't mind her, she's just enjoying the fresh air before she moves to her new condo." Mr. Vance looked at me, then at Karen. "Right. Well, I've seen enough. I'm ready to talk numbers." Karen's eyes lit up like slot machine wheels. She practically dragged him back inside. I kept rocking on the swing. I could hear their muffled voices through the open window. I heard the words, "cash offer." I heard closing in 14 days. I heard champagne corks popping. She had done it. She had found a buyer. She thought she had just sold my life out from under me. I finished my row of knitting and set the needles down. It was a perfect red square. A red flag. "Enjoy the champagne, Karen. It's the last thing you'll ever celebrate in this house." By 7 p.m., the sold sticker wasn't officially on the sign yet, but in Karen's mind, the money was already in the bank. She ordered expensive sushi takeout, something she knew I didn't eat. We sat around the dining table. David was drinking scotch, pouring it with a heavy hand. Karen was scrolling through Expedia on her iPad. "First class to Milan," she murmured, tapping the screen. "We deserve it, babe. After all this stress with the house, we need a reset. The kids can stay at a camp." I watched Leo and Mia pushing rice around their plates. They weren't included in the vacation. They were baggage. Karen put her iPad down and slid a thick stack of papers across the mahogany table toward me. It landed with a heavy thud. "Okay, Rose," she said, popping a piece of ginger into her mouth. "Mr. Vance is not messing around. He wired the earnest money. We signed tonight. Closing is in 14 days. David and I already signed the main deed transfer." She pointed to a line at the bottom of the page marked occupant/witness. "We just need you to sign here. It's a standard acknowledgement that you agree to vacate the premises within 30 days. Just a formality." I picked up the pen. It felt cold and heavy, like a weapon I didn't want to use. I didn't look at the paper. I looked at my son. David was staring into his glass, swirling the amber liquid. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been slowly hollowed out over 10 years. "David," I said softly. He flinched. He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Son," I asked, keeping my voice gentle, "are you sure about this? This isn't just wood and brick. Your father built this porch. You took your first steps in this hallway. This house is supposed to be for Leo and Mia one day." Karen slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "Oh, stop the guilt trip, Rose. We are doing this for the kids. The equity in this house is dead money. We're reinvesting it." I ignored her. I kept my eyes locked on David. "David," I repeated, "if you sign this, you are selling your children's birthright. Is that what you want? Or is that what she wants?" The room went deadly silent. Even the kids stopped chewing. David looked at me. Then he looked at Karen. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was terrified of her. He was terrified of being alone. He looked back down at his drink. It's for the best, Mom. Please, just sign it. Don't make it harder than it is." My heart broke, not with a loud crack, but with a quiet, final sigh. My son was gone. The boy I raised had been replaced by this coward who would sell his mother to buy a quiet life. "Okay," I whispered. I looked at the signature line, Rose Henderson. I capped the pen. I placed it gently on top of the document. "No," I said. Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no. I replied, my voice gaining strength, the tremble vanishing. "I won't sign it." Karen let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Rose, don't be senile. You have to sign. If you don't, you're sabotaging the deal." "I'm not sabotaging anything," I said, reaching into my knitting bag on the floor. "I'm just following the rules." "Rules? What rules?" Karen shrieked, standing up. "David owns this house. He makes the rules." I pulled the blue velvet box out of the bag and set it on the table right next to the sushi platter. "Actually," I said, opening the lid, "he doesn't." Karen stared at the blue velvet box like it was a bomb. Then she snatched it off the table, nearly knocking over her wine glass. "What is this?" she snapped, flipping open the lid. "Some sentimental garbage? Old love letters?" She pulled out the documents. The thick, cream-colored paper rustled loudly in the silent room. David leaned in, squinting, trying to read over her shoulder. "It's a deed of trust," I said calmly, picking up my napkin and dabbing my mouth. "Dated October 14th, 2012. Karen scanned the pages, her eyes darting back and forth. I watched the color drain from her face. It started at her neck and moved up, leaving her pale and ghostly under the dining room chandelier. This says the house is property of the Henderson Family Trust," she stammered. She looked at David. "David, what is this? You told me the title was in your name." David looked confused. He rubbed his temples. I think I remember this. Dad took me to the notary a few months before he passed. He said it was for tax purposes. I just signed it. I didn't think it mattered." "It matters," I said. "Keep reading, Karen. Read the section on beneficiaries." Karen turned the page. Her hand was shaking now. "Upon the passing of Arthur Henderson," she read, her voice barely a whisper, "the primary beneficiaries of the trust assets shall be the direct biological descendants of David Henderson." She stopped. She looked at Leo and Mia, who were sitting quietly at the end of the table, eyes wide. "That means," I said, leaning forward, "that David doesn't own this house. You certainly don't own this house. They do." I pointed to my grandchildren. "Leo and Mia are the owners. David is merely the trustee, a manager, and I am the protector of the trust." Karen dropped the papers on the table. "This is insane. They are children. They can't own real estate." "The trust owns it for them," I corrected, "until they are 25, and the trust has very strict rules about preserving the asset." I stood up slowly. I didn't need my cane this time. I felt 10 feet tall. You tried to sell their inheritance to buy yourself a villa in Italy, I said, my voice hard as steel. You locked the pantry. You tried to move me into a freezing garage. You treated the actual owners of this house like nuisances in their own home. Karen turned to David, desperation creeping into her voice. David, do something. Call a lawyer. We can break this trust. We can sue. It's an irrevocable trust, Karen, I said, delivering the final blow. Do you know what irrevocable means? It means you can scream, you can cry, and you can hire every lawyer in the state, but you cannot change it. Arthur made sure of that. He knew exactly what kind of woman might come along one day. David put his head in his hands. He knew he was beaten. But Karen? She wasn't ready to give up. She had that look in her eye, the look of a cornered animal. Fine, she hissed, standing up and smoothing her skirt. So we can't sell it. Fine, but we still live here. And since I am the legal guardian of these owners, I still say what goes. And I say you are moving to that condo, Rose? I smiled. It was the smile Mrs. Higgins had taught me. Oh, Karen, I said softly. You really should have read the whole document, especially the clause about removal of residence for cause. Karen stood there with her hands on her hips, her chin high, trying to look like the lady of the manor. You can't kick me out, Rose. I have rights. I have established residency. And unless you want a messy court battle that will drain this trust dry, you're going to back off. Just then, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. It was a cheerful, polite sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Who is that at this hour? David asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. I'll get it, I said, walking past Karen without glancing at her. I opened the front door. Standing on the porch, wearing a trench coat over her tweed suit and holding a leather briefcase, was Martha Higgins. Good evening, Rose, she said loudly enough for the whole room to hear. I hope I'm not interrupting dinner, although judging by the shouting, I assume the sushi didn't agree with everyone. She marched into the dining room, placing her briefcase on the table right on top of Karen's wine coaster. Who are you? Karen demanded. I am Martha Higgins, she replied, pulling out a business card. I am the executor of Arthur Henderson's estate and the primary trustee of the Henderson Family Trust, and you, I assume, are the woman attempting to commit real estate fraud. Karen sputtered. Fraud? Martha held up a hand. Save it for the judge, dear. I'm here to enforce Clause 9, Section C of the Trust Agreement. We call it the Protector Clause. She pulled a document from her bag and began to read, her voice crisp and authoritative. If any resident or guardian of the beneficiaries attempts to liquidate, leverage, or devalue the trust assets for personal gain without the consent of the trustee, they are deemed hostile to the interest of the beneficiaries. Martha looked over her glasses at Karen. Attempting to sell this house and keep the proceeds? That is the definition of hostile. So what? Karen crossed her arms. You going to sue me? No, Martha smiled. The clause continues. Upon such an event, the hostile party's right to reside on the property is immediately revoked to protect the assets. The room went silent. Revoked? David whispered. It means, I said, stepping forward, that you are evicted, both of you. But the kids, Karen yelled, pointing at Leo and Mia. I'm their mother. You can't separate us. We aren't separating anyone, Martha said calmly. The children are the owners. They stay. Rose is the protector. She stays. You, however, you are a liability. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. If you are still here tomorrow at sunset, I will file criminal charges for attempted fraud and embezzlement, and I will petition the family court for emergency custody based on your attempt to rob your own children. Karen looked at David, desperate for an ally. David, say something. Are you going to let these old hags throw us out? David looked at his wife, really looked at her, for the first time in years. He saw the greed. He saw the cruelty. He looked at his mother, standing strong. He looked at his terrified children. They aren't throwing us out, Karen, David said, his voice quiet but final. They're throwing you out. Karen gasped. What? I'm staying, David said, tears welling up in his eyes. I'm staying to fix this. to fix what I broke, but you need to go." Karen looked around the room. She was completely alone. The walls she tried to sell were closing in on her. The junk she tried to throw out was now standing guard against her. She let out a scream of pure frustration, grabbed her purse, and stormed toward the stairs. "Fine, keep this rotting old house. I hate it anyway." "We know, dear," Martha called after her. "Don't forget to leave the keys." Karen didn't leave quietly. She spent the next 2 hours slamming drawers, dragging suitcases across the hardwood floors, and shouting into her phone at her mother. She took everything she could carry: the espresso machine, the silk curtains she had bought, even the decorative soaps from the guest bathroom. I sat in the living room with Leo and Mia, reading them a book to drown out the noise of her tantrum. When she finally walked out the front door, she didn't say goodbye to the children. She just looked at David, who was standing on the porch, and spat out, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer about alimony." Then she got into her leased SUV and peeled out of the driveway, disappearing into the night. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that comes after a fever breaks. David walked back inside. He looked 10 years older. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes red. He looked at me, then at the kids. He didn't know where to stand in his own house anymore. "Mom," he choked out, his voice cracking. I don't know what to say. I almost let her." "Don't," I said, raising a hand. "Don't apologize yet, David. Apologies are words. I need to see actions. You let a wolf into the henhouse because she flattered you. You need to figure out why you were so willing to let your children starve just to keep the peace." He nodded, shame coloring his cheeks. "I will. I promise." "Good," I said. "But first, we have a job to do." I stood up and walked to the mudroom. I reached behind the coats and pulled out Arthur's heavy-duty bolt cutters. They were cold and greasy, smelling of iron. "Come on," I said to the kids. "Grandma needs some helpers." We marched into the kitchen. David followed us, watching silently. I stood in front of the pantry door. That shiny brass padlock glared at me, a symbol of every no, every you can't. Every hungry night my grandchildren had endured. I positioned the jaws of the bolt cutters around the shackle. My hands weren't shaking. My arthritis didn't hurt. I felt the strength of every grandmother who has ever had to defend her family coursing through my veins. "Leo," I said, "count to 3 for me." "1," Leo whispered, his eyes wide. "2," Mia joined in. "3." I squeezed the handles with everything I had. Snap. The sound was loud, sharp, and violent. The padlock fell to the floor with a heavy clank, spinning like a dead coin. I pulled the hasp open and swung the pantry door wide. The shelves were still stocked with the forbidden flour, sugar, and chocolate chips I had hidden in the back. I turned to Leo and Mia. "Who wants cookies?" Leo didn't answer. He just ran to me and wrapped his arms around my waist, burying his face in my apron. Mia joined him. We stood there in a group hug, crying and laughing at the same time. David picked up the broken padlock from the floor. He looked at it, then tossed it into the trash can. "I'll fix the door tomorrow, Mom," he said softly. "I'll fill the holes with wood putty. You won't even see them." "I know you will," I said, looking at my son. He wasn't fully back yet, but he was trying. And in this house, trying was enough for a start. 6 months have passed since the padlock hit the floor. It's Sunday morning. If you walked through the front door right now, you wouldn't smell antiseptic or bleach. You would smell slow-cooked pot roast, rosemary, and the sweet, warm scent of vanilla extract. The house smells like a hug again. The kitchen is a mess, and I couldn't be happier. Leo and Mia are sitting on the counter, right where they belong, covered in flour. We are making double chocolate chip cookies. There is no kale in sight. "Grandma, look!" Leo laughs, smearing chocolate on his nose. "I'm a reindeer." I wipe his nose with my apron, laughing with him. "You're a messy reindeer, that's what you are." Through the kitchen window, I can see David in the backyard. He's wearing his old flannel shirt and work boots. He's fixing the garden fence that Karen said was ugly and wanted to tear down. He's sanding the wood, taking his time, checking his work. He looks more like his father every day. He's quiet now, but it's a peaceful quiet, not a scared one. He's working hard to earn back the trust he lost, and he knows it takes time. But he shows up. Every day, he shows up. We haven't heard much from Karen. The lawyers are handling the divorce. I heard she moved to the city and is looking for a new project. I mean, a new husband. I almost pity the man who opens the door to her. Almost. I walked into the living room while the cookies were in the oven. The walls are no longer hospital white. We painted them a soft, warm cream. Buttercup, the color Arthur loved. The porcelain shepherdess is back on the mantelpiece, right where she belongs. I picked up the framed photo of Arthur standing next to his old truck. He looked so serious in the photo, but I knew the twinkle in his eyes. I tapped the glass gently with my finger. "We did good, old man," I whispered. "The kids are safe. The house is safe. And David, he's coming back to us." The oven timer dinged in the kitchen, followed by the cheers of 2 hungry children. "Grandma, cookies." I smiled at Arthur one last time. "Duty calls." I walked back into my kitchen, my cane tapping a happy rhythm on the floor. This is my house. These are my grandchildren, and nobody, absolutely nobody, tells me when to stop baking.